Okay, so remember on Friday, what we did was example 1. And a big note, just because this is different than what I had told you before, is that we're now not setting this equal to 0. That was kind of a big change for us. And I'll make sure you guys know to set equal to 0 or not on your quiz. If I even have any of those, they might all be set equal to 0, or if they're not, you don't touch them. But the whole idea here is that we can make this perfect square trinomial where it factors as like a factor that's squared, so that we could take a square root of both sides. So you guys had some nice answers. You had some answers with square roots that you had to simplify, and then we had some answers with I, right? So today, we're going to start the actual completing the square process. So a definition for us, all quadratic equations can be solved using the properties of equality to manipulate the equation until one side is a perfect square, trinomial really, that should say. So this process is called completing the square. And it does have steps to it. So the steps here, to complete the square for any quadratic expression of the form x squared plus bx, follow the steps below. So the idea is that you're going to have to find 1/2 of b, the coefficient of x, square the result in step 1, and add the results of step 2 to x squared plus bx. And then they give you these crazy like symbols here that's just kind of confusing. What that means is, if you look back here, 6, right? 1/2 of 6 would be 3. And if you squared it, you get to 9. That makes a perfect square trinomial. So that's what it's saying. And I think that'll be more clear as we kind of go through it a couple times. So what example 2 wants us to do, we're just going to complete the square, meaning we're going to make a perfect square trinomial. We're not actually solving for x here. So there's no equal sign here at all. So what this wants us to do is it wants us to take 1/2 of our b value. So remember, in a quadratic equation, your b value is always this number that's attached to x. So in this case, we're going to, and I always write this intermediate step out, b over 2 squared. So this is like my intermediate step. If b is -7, this would be -7 over 2 squared. Now, this is inconvenient, and I don't know why I gave you 2 odd ones, just because I'm mean, I guess. Maybe we'll change part C. It's not fun to do when they're odd, because is 7 divisible by 2? Is it? No, heck no. So what we have to do is you have to put the square into both parts. So can anybody tell me what is -7 squared? 49, positive 49. And what's 2 squared? 4. This is my c value that I then need to add. So the value of c that makes this a perfect square trinomial would be x squared minus 7x plus this 49 over 4. This is probably a bad example to start with, because then the rule is this is a perfect square trinomial, and it will factor as x minus whatever this middle part is, so minus 7 over 2 squared. So there's 2 parts to this answer. So if you saw in Friday's homework, there was like 2 parts to each of the following questions that we didn't do. Your first answer would be this 49 over 4. So I guess let me write this down and go formative speak. Our first answer would be 49 over 4. That's the value of c. And our second answer would be this thing factored. Okay, it's no fun when they're odd. I don't know why I started with an odd one. Let's look at B. So our intermediate step, the step to start these, is that you're going to take 1/2 of your B value. So again, I always write this B over 2 squared. This is always what we're looking for. So when I plug this in, it would be 20 over 2 squared. In this case, what is 20 over 2? 10. So this one actually divides. So we have 10 squared, which would be equal to what? 100. So what I can plug in to make this equation a perfect square trinomial, I can make it x squared plus 20x plus 100 and so you can jump then right to, once you have this as 100, this is what our C needs to be in order to make this factor as x plus this number here, 10 squared. And if you're not sure why that's happening, just a reminder, the way we factor, you say, okay, what multiplies to 100 but adds to this middle number? So what multiplies to 100? 10 and 10. And so that's why this factors this way. That's all we're doing here. So on go formative, I would put that my C is 100. And I would say that this factors as x plus 10 squared. All right, I don't want to give you two odd ones. So somebody throw out an even number that's not 21. 22, perfect. Let's change this to 22. We'll just make this nicer. I don't know why I did two odd ones. Okay, so my first step here, and our first step in completing the square, is that we are going to say, okay, my b over 2 squared, which in this case would be 22 over 2 squared. What is 22 divided by 2? 11. And what's 11 squared? 121. All right, that's my value of C. So then I would make this x squared plus 22x plus 121. So without doing any calculations, tell me, what is this factor to?
X plus 11 squared.
Good. X plus 11 squared. So on go formative, I would enter C equals 121. And when I factor it, it's x plus 11 squared. So this was going to be example 2 that we did on Friday, but I wanted to have some more time to talk about other things. Are there questions about example 2? So it's just making it so that you can make these nice factors. So let's see how this is involved in our completing the square. So flip to example 3, where we're going to incorporate this example and example 1 into the full completing the square process. All right, example 3, notice I gave you all nice even ones, because now I'm not being mean. But here there's some more steps for them. So completing the square, we're still going to use this idea of b over 2. But before we do that, we have an extra number here. You guys need to get rid of that number. So we're going to move this negative 26 over by adding 26 to both sides. Because what I want this to look like is I want to have like a blank space here so that I can find that C like we did in example 2. What I like to do, because you guys know I'm a pretty visual person, I like to actually leave a space. So I will make this x squared minus 16x plus blank equals, what's 10 plus 26? 36. And then I have to put another plus blank. The reason I need to put 2 plus blanks, I always want you guys to think of this equal as like a balance. That's what an equation is. It's an equal thing. So if we are going to add a number arbitrarily over here, we better add it to the other side of the balance as well. Now, once we have that, this is where we do that b over 2 business that we just did in example 2. So maybe I'll do this all in pink so we have sort of, this is like a different step. So what is my b value here? What number is next to just my x? Negative 16. So we have negative 16 divided by 2. What is negative 16 divided by 2? Negative 8. And what is negative 8 squared? 64. Okay, so this is the number that I'm going to add to both sides. We will do this 4 times so that this process gets in your brains. Okay, this is like my intermediate step. Now this looks like example 2, or example 1, honestly, where I can square. This is now a perfect square trinomial. It will factor as x, and then it's always this number before you square it. So in this case, it's going to be minus 8 squared equals, what's 36 plus 64? What was that? 100. It's always nice when it's a nice perfect square. It won't always be, but it's nice when that happens. Are we all clear on why this is x minus 8 squared, by the way? Again, the idea here is what multiplies to positive 64, but adds to negative 16. And in this case, it would be negative 8 and negative 8. So you can just remember to factor it this way. But now this looks like example 1 that we did on Friday. You can go ahead and take a square root of both sides, which on the left would leave us with x minus 8. And on the right, that'll leave us with, what do I need to remember to put? It is 10, but what else? Plus or minus. Because remember, every quadratic should have 2 solutions because it's a parabola hitting the x-axis twice. Or best case scenarios, it hits it exactly once, but those are pretty rare. So then I need to solve for x. I'm going to add 8. And remember, my reminder also on Friday was that when you add it, put it right after the equal sign. So really, I have x equals 8 plus or minus 10. Since these are both whole numbers, I do need to actually split this off and evaluate them both. So I have x equals 8 plus 10, and x equals 8 minus 10. So my answer would be x equals 18, comma, negative 2. Don't put the x equals for your go formative, but just list them. That's completing the square. It is a process. We're going to do it 4 times so that it's in your head because you guys have to do it to kind of memorize it. It is always something that I have to sort of reteach myself when I go through these, but it is doable. Okay, so let's look at part B. I need to start by moving this number over. So I'm going to subtract 41 from both sides. So it would be 3 minus 41, because I'm not going to try and think right now, is negative 38. So I have x squared minus 14x. When you do this, remember to add the plus blank equals negative 38 plus blank. Next step is like our example 2 step. So I'm going to find my b over 2, just all in pink, b over 2 squared. What is my b value here? What's my b value? Negative 14 over 2 squared. And it's really nice when it's an even number. On your homework today, I made them all even numbers. In fact, I would say don't use completing the square if it's not an even number. What is negative 14 divided by 2? Negative 7. And what's negative 7 squared? 49. So I'm adding 49 to both sides. Which is good because that makes this positive. So now I don't have to worry about an I thing when I take a square root. So I have x squared minus 14x plus 49 equals 11. And then this will factor as x minus 7 squared equals 11. And again, just so you guys see it, this part here always comes from this part right before you square it. You can also just talk yourself through it, what multiplies to positive 49 but adds to negative 14. Once I have this perfect square, I can take a square root of both sides. Is 11 a perfect square? No. Does it have any perfect squares in it? Yeah, there's nothing you can do with 11. It's actually a prime number, so there's no like breaking it up and looking for a buddy to bust out of jail. So I'm just going to add 7 to both sides. So my answer on go formative would be x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 11. Or you can put it in as 7 plus square root of 11, comma, 7 minus square root of 11, or flip those. Okay, I have it in 3 different ways for you guys. If you can simplify the square root, you need to. But again, in this case, 11, that's not anything we can simplify further. Okay, before I do example C and D, do we have any questions? Is anyone completely lost on one of these steps? There's no, where did this number come from? All right, so see if you guys can walk me through part C. What is my first step for part C? What do I need to do first? What was that? Add 5. Okay, so I'm going to add 5 because I just want x's over on the left, basically. So when I add 5, I'm going to add a blank to both sides. Oops. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1 plus blank. Again, we have to add it to both sides because everything's fair and equal. Keep our balance balanced. What is my b value? Negative 2. So I'm going to take that b over 2 step. I will put it inside. What's negative 2 divided by 2? Negative 1. What's negative 1 squared? Positive 1. So I am adding 1 to both sides. Oh, this is a nice one. This is lovely when this happens. So what I have is x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Really, this is just a factoring one now. But this does factor as a perfect square trinomial. What does it factor as? X minus 1 squared. Good. You can pull that right from here. That's this number here. Or you can just look at it and say what multiplies to positive 1 adds to negative 2. From here, hopefully you guys can see what the answer is anyways, but go ahead and take a square root. Square root of 0 is what? 0. And do you need a plus or minus here? No, I mean, there is no positive or negative 0, right? So then I would just add 1 over, and this one only has one solution because it is a parabola that's actually sitting right on the x-axis. So it'd just be x equals 1. I don't think you have one in your homework like this, but it could happen. That was a pretty weird one. Questions about that one? Last one, because let's remind ourselves about i's. So fun. I'm pretty sure this one has an I. All right, what's my first step for part D? Minus 26. So I'll have x squared minus 4x plus blank equals 6 minus 26 is negative 20 plus blank. And again, I like to put that plus blank because that's my visual reminder. I get myself into this routine. And then again, I like to have this middle step too. And I don't know why I always write out the b over 2 squared, but I do. What's my b value here? Negative 4 over 2 squared could be negative 2 squared, which is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. This will leave me with x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals negative 16. At least it's a perfect square. What will this left side factor to? Anybody? What does my left side factor to? X minus 2 and then the squared equals negative 16. So now I can take the square root. So I'd have x minus 2 equals, without too much thought, what is the square root of negative 16? Ooh, so close. 4i, and it's a plus or minus. Good, you're right. It is 8 times 2, but yes, it's 4 times 4. So remember, the way we do that is we say, okay, 16 is a pair of 4s, right? So that's why a 4 comes out. But then since it's also negative, you have to add the I. Then I will add my 2 to both sides. These are not actually both whole numbers, so I do need to leave this answer as x equals 2 plus or minus 4i, or You can split it as 2 plus 4i, comma, 2 minus 4i, or 2 minus 4i, 2 plus 4i. I don't really care. Go formative has 3 different answers in it. Do we have questions about completing the square?